Hey, Nathan.
Hey Sam, what's up?
It's been a minute. I'm not
It's
even
been
sure I
many
released
minutes.
the episode we recorded before this. I have to look, but
Should I
in
wear
fact, I
these?
am. I am going to look right now. Oh, those are very attractive. For those
Thank
of
you.
you that are that have survived this, what do we want to call this? Hiatus, lull,
Doldrums.
doldrums.
The um, the calm before the storm.
The storm is coming.
The
After the
calm before
calm.
the podcast storm. The storm of podcasts.
Oh, by the way, because I've been obsessed with websites this year. At one point or another, I came across your website, which I know you've been tinkering with
Oh,
for quite a
my
while, and
website?
I really
You?
liked.
Oh,
Well,
you're
I
one
was
of the
searching for.
users that I saw.
I did upload our last episode was an hour long, and it was January 25th, and it was about the dilation of time. But in just
Whoa.
now, in searching for the podcast on Google, your website ranked to the top. And I remember I
Oh,
came across the podcast page that you made, and I was very impressed. I liked it so much. I don't think you ever ran it by me, and just in terms of what you were going to write and
yeah, and
just like
yeah,
framing of
any
what it
notes?
is, how many episodes we have, how many listeners. I mean, we have like tens of thousands of listeners, and you and I
Okay.
both just kind of were like, ah, we're too busy.
Yeah, I know.
And now
Yeah,
there's like
sorry.
professional full-time wedding podcasters. That's literally like all they do. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
We were the first, I have to say. I think in like 2016, at least as far as the wedding genre of podcasting,
Mhm.
we were definitely near the first, if not specifically. There may have been like a business focused one, which is always sort of a,
I
you
mean, is
know,
that really true? I don't know. I don't know. I
I,
haven't.
how
Feel
do you
free if
verify
anyone else
such
has
things, right?
a podcast that existed before the Epic podcast about weddings. Feel free to put that in the comments.
Yeah, I would like to know because that's a tough thing to measure on the internet because the internet
Yeah,
is rapidly disappearing. Sadly,
it is. It's rapidly disappearing, and me and Abby have conversations about this a lot,
really,
actually, about like the old internet and or the previous internet, I guess I should say.
yes.
And
Before
yeah,
the in-shitification of everything, just seems to be
exactly.
the word people like to.
Yeah, everyone's been funneled into a few different websites, and that's it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, dude, I remember finding all the weirdest stuff like online.
100%. Yep.
There is though some really weird. I'm not even gonna look it up right now, but there's a really weird guy in
Mm-hmm.
Baltimore who like has like a monster movie YouTube, and he has his own website, and it's like so old school, and he
That's
dresses
awesome.
up like Dracula, and he like introduces the movie feature of the week. It's really great. Anyway, but it's stuff like that I miss. I don't
So
know.
here's the thing, though. I'm completely the same. Had a bunch of random weird discoveries. You're like, oh my god, how did I get here? What am I watching? Turn it off. And
Yeah,
that used to be kind of the old internet experience. But sometimes you wouldn't want to turn it off. Sometimes something would bring you back. And for me, one of those spaces, they renamed themselves maybe like 4 years ago or something. They used to be called
oh, Gear
gearsluts.com,
Sluts. Yeah.
gear sluts. And it wasn't meant to be like a negative thing. It was just straight up all about people obsessed with the audio equipment, and
Mm-hmm.
it was just a discussion forum. And they renamed themselves to be Gear Space, much
Gear
more
Space.
appropriate. Great. I
Okay.
can't tell you how many times I had the other one up on my computer at like work or something in college, and something like a
They were like,
my boss
they
would
were
come
like,
by, and I'd be like,
they were like,
yeah.
we want you to access our website, so we're changing our name.
I would be surprised if they didn't get like auto blocked on so many things,
Yeah.
especially nowadays. But here's the thing. There's still a few spaces like that I go back
Right.
to today, and I think one of the big reasons for it is they're extremely, if not complete, the extremely slow, if not complete lack of evolution. Like it's kind of the same website that it was 15 something years ago. And
Can you give
I
me an
think
example?
Gearspace, other than their
Oh yeah,
renaming of their
like the forums look the
overall site,
same
the
and everything.
forums are the same. All the posts, like I can still log in with my original username from way back when did I joined in 2006. So there it is. I'm apparently a gear maniac.
Ooh,
But
I would also describe you that way. So
having all of this,
I don't need gear sluts to tell me that you're a gear maniac, Sam.
I'm looking at my old profile on here and everything, and having that, it's like MySpace is the shining example of what not to do, but what like every commercial entity is slowly sort of doing. They just like eventually, because there's so much technical debt of decisions made and platforms used, from the
From
inception
those
point
old
of what make them
websites.
really popular, that they have to like wipe the whole slate clean and start over. I mean, that hasn't happened yet with like Facebook, really. I mean, although they have had some
No.
terrible redesigns, they haven't. Well, actually, I would argue to say that Facebook did kind of have that. Like, I don't think my Facebook profile or page looks anything
No, it's
resembling
different
what it used
now.
to. Yeah.
Plus they
Eh,
have like a dark mode now. You know, they didn't before.
yeah.
Things like
But
that.
there's sites like Gearspace, or there's another one I love. It's just a tech commentator. I'm sure I've mentioned him many times to you, John Gruber with daringfireball.net. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
page of articles and writing, and he's kept it more or less the same in terms of format, and it is super super basic because it's almost all text, for like 20 years now or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
there's just, I think there's so much temptation for the people that control something that they started, right? The founders of Daring Fireball or Gearspace, or,
Sure.
there's probably a few other examples where they haven't really changed much. There's such a temptation to overhaul stuff and like become modern, or you
Yeah.
get bored because you're the one that's on the site every single day, especially on the back end, which
Sure.
probably really never
Which
changes.
probably sucks. Yeah.
Yeah. And but from the end user perspective, especially after a certain amount of time, I don't know really what that is. Maybe 8 years or so. The even your most obsessed power users, well, no, maybe they would empathize with like, okay, this could use a little overhaul, but maybe not, because they have a different emotional connection to the space that they're in. It's
Oh
like
yeah, they want
comforting
it.
to
No, they
be.
want to keep it the way
Exactly.
it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you, the creator, you have a very different perspective on that. It's the exact same kind of thing that happens with making a photo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So many times I'll have a photo that I just kind of like, I almost even forgot to put that in there. And everybody's like, oh my God, that's my favorite one. And I'm
I
like,
know that
really?
happens with me
What?
all the time. I'm like,
Yes. Yep.
okay, I guess
It's
I don't
really,
understand
really
you at all.
tough. It's so tough to maintain a fresh perspective on how it's going to hit
Mm-hmm.
anybody else that wasn't the one that built the thing, where you don't intimately know all the little stories and feelings attached to the process of making it. And
Right.
it's frustrating though, because even like you said, like you experience this, I'm sure every photographer experiences that at some point, and I still don't have that figured out. I still don't know how to look at my work as if I've never seen it before, and
Right.
pick the
Yeah.
one that's going to be. I guarantee there's like little nuggets of gold throughout all of our like portfolios, or not our portfolios, but our unseen,
Oh,
like Lightroom catalogs, photos that
I'll
just never saw the light of day because we were like, she was like, or he was like feeling weird in that moment. I'm not going to post it, but the photo would be amazing removed from like the context of what you have as a memory, right?
yeah, I'll give you an example right now. I just booked a client off a single photo that I didn't even like. Okay, so
Interesting.
let's go back here. So I'm gonna actually let me see if I can find the photo.
Okay.
So basically, um, I got a request from somebody getting married at Woodend, um,
Great
who
venue.
we both have shot there a bunch of times.
Is that technically Maryland, or is it
I
Virginia?
think it is Maryland.
Yeah. Okay.
So Glow Weddings and Events. Okay, so
This is a
uh,
planner.
it's a planner. So they have this planner, and on the website, on the planner's website, they have a list of, or they have a whole section just on Woodend, and it's all got like portfolio photos. And there's tons of, there's like 100, 200 photos in there of all different photographers. Just tons, just all on top of each other. So it's just like one section, like it's like 6 or 7 photos of one photographer, 6 or 7 in the other. You can't tell where they change. It's just all bunch of
Mm-hmm.
whole smattering of images. And they were like, we saw one photo on there and we were like, this is amazing. And so we had to reach out to that photographer and it was you. And I was like, okay. And so while I was meeting with them, I was like, what was it? What photo was it? And it's this ultra wide photo that I took of like on on that like portico on the like second floor. There's like
There's a
this
second. Oh,
there,
okay.
you know,
Yeah.
you can go out of the bridal suite and there's like
Sure.
a big like half circle thing and there's like a tree behind it. And I wanted to take a photo of them with the tree, the whole tree behind them. So I did an ultra wide photo, and it's cool. You get the ultra wide sense of it, and like you see the whole tree, but they're like stretched out to like oblivion. They look like stick figures. And I almost
Oh.
didn't even deliver that photo. In fact, I'd forgotten that I had delivered that photo. I thought that I had left it out because I didn't like it anymore once I was editing it. And they were like, that was the one we were like, this is so cool. And we have to book you. And I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I delivered it, I guess. But like, you know, it's
Yeah,
like,
that just earned you thousands of dollars. Amazing.
yeah, I mean, I don't understand. So like, it's tough to like know what clients even want. Like the photos that I'm excited to deliver, I'm starting increasingly seeing that like the stuff on my website is not necessarily what draws people in. It's
Mm,
more once I meet with them, you know, I can if they can get the sense that the photos are going to be cool, then I meet with them, then I book them because they like me as a person, like, or they, you know, they can
yeah.
tell that you know, I'm on their side and going to be a problem solver. But in terms of like what brings people in, like I don't know, like
Yeah,
at
exactly.
this point
I
all
don't know.
bets are off.
It's so tough to unless you do a whole lot of, what do they call it in the biz, the professional filmmaking biz, where they have like focus groups.
Oh
Unless you
yeah,
do like a
focus group,
lot of
that would be
like
cool.
measured, more or less scientific, or at least somehow consistently structured focus
Sciency.
group of people uh, looking at your work and rating it, or giving you feedback, you're never really going to know for sure.
Right.
I don't think. And that's, again, going back to like the website overhaul that I did this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually something I did far less than my very first website overhaul way back in like 2015. But I still got outside feedback where I would just send
Mm-hmm.
the link to a friend or family, especially if I was there in person, and even just like at dinner somewhere at a conference, like, hey, here's my new website. What do you think? And just absorb the feedback. And
Mm-hmm.
it's very, very interesting to watch that, because I feel like I've got a weird perspective on how that unfolds. And I
What do you
actually
mean?
have a lot. Okay, yeah, let me explain it. I have a
I also
lot
have
of
opinions on
experience
this.
working with you on this,
Mm-hmm.
because here's what happens when you're making a record. You're recording a song with a
Yep.
band or a musician, okay? You
Mm-hmm.
say, all right, let's listen to that take, or let's listen to this mix, and here we go. And when the mix is sitting there in front of you, you see all the different like volume sliders,
Mm-hmm.
effects, chains, all this stuff. And you start to sit down and listen. It's like, oh, okay, this sounds good. This sounds good. But that snare, let's look at that snare. Let's see what it's, let's see all the compression and EQ and everything that's happening there. And we start tinkering with it. And for me, I'm like, what about the reverb on the backing vocals? That was what I was,
Mm-hmm.
snare. What?
Yeah.
So it's this effect of like, when you know you can change something, uh, it's almost like you invent a reason to. So let me put it this way, and it's not just you, but I think almost every musician I've ever worked with in recording, when we're sitting down and the song is unfolded in front of us and we're looking at it and we know we can make changes, somebody always comes up with a change to make. It's
Yeah.
like it's like, okay, yeah, well, we're here. Let's change something. Something has to be needed in a
Mm-hmm.
change. However, you put a couple weeks in between maybe just me tinkering with the mix and then sending the files to somebody, and it's like, oh yeah, that sounds pretty good. Or you put even a longer amount of time, months in between, where maybe it's something I've recorded myself, like a song, where at the time I distinctly remember, if not actually have notes in the track of like, ooh, I need to like fix this a little bit. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll listen to it completely detached from even the memory of that song existing sometimes, and be like, oh my God, that sounds great. I thought these were scratch vocals. No, this is fine. They
Yeah,
sound
this is
great.
great. Mm-hmm.
And and that's like just listening on my iPhone without every single track open in the DAW. And so something like that, I think, really unfolds with any, I don't want to say it's even part of the creative process. It's just like with anything where you can tinker, people will invent something to tinker. And part of that is really helpful, because it would suck to like give someone your website and be like, yeah, I worked on this thing, here it is. And then they're just like, yeah, looks fine. Great. No changes. It's like,
Right.
really? None at all. It's nice to get the feedback, but you, as the person doing it, you definitely want to turn off the emotional response to the critique, and
Sure.
just take the information in and try and get a variety of people and to look at this thing that you made, if it's your website or whatever. Maybe it's a photo that you edited, and see where those people overlap independent of them knowing it, right? So hopefully
Right.
you can get feedback on an individual basis over a period of time, so they don't hear what the other person is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes that also encourages a weird route. It's like, oh yeah, that snare sounds weird in this mix. And then the bassist is like, oh, it does. You're right.
Yeah,
I
it
didn't even notice.
does.
It's like, wait a second.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even notice, but now it sounds weird to you. That doesn't make sense.
I mean, yeah,
I mean, it
but you
can.
can
I'm
also
not
rely on other people to like be,
totally
have different ears than you and be like, okay, yeah, you're training your ears with your friends,
a hundred
and your
percent.
bandmates.
Yep. 100%. And it's all
Mm-hmm.
valuable. It's just, you don't want to, I think, especially if it's something you've never made before, or you're in your
Right.
early phase, it can be, at least I remember feeling like I just need to start over. I just want to just wipe the slate clean and start over.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that is ever really like necessary. It's just, you have this, again, going back to like websites, wanting to just, let's just completely overhaul our branding. You
Yeah.
have a different experience that carries a lot of baggage
Mm-hmm.
for you emotionally. A lot of times, if you're doing good work, it probably has a significant amount of struggle and baggage, where sometimes you just want to just wipe the slate clean. And because now, given your experience and exposure to the feedback or whatever, you can probably do it better the next time around. But then you risk falling into this phase of just like constantly never getting anything complete. And
Right.
anyway, now we're just
You
getting down that whole
well,
rabbit hole. But yeah,
yeah, but I mean, okay. So going with that, I heard some really interesting advice, um, from a pretty, like a YouTube, like a guy who mixes on YouTube, and and I've heard this from other mixing art engineers as well, that the best way to mix is to listen to the track one time, and then that's it. You as soon as you're done listening to it, and you've made all your notes based on that mix, you go with your gut on everything. Like, if you're like, I think the vocals sound a little loud, you go with your gut, you make the change, and you don't listen to it again. You make the change, and you're like, okay, that's the change that I wanted to do. You put it away, and you come back the next day, and you listen to it, boom, like that. And you do all your changes at once, but then you don't re-listen and re-listen and re-listen. You get ear fatigue, and you also start convincing yourself of things that may not necessarily be true.
yeah.
And that I think is really cool. I've been taking that into the sort of remixing that I've been doing with some of my stuff. And
I think that
interesting.
approach makes perfect sense, but it's also a lot easier to do when you've got a very well defined, sort of proven workflow of
That's
of
true. That's
of
true.
like what equipment you're using. And I think especially in the
Yeah.
early days, not only are you fighting
Especially.
this tendency to want to make something that tweak, make it better, iterate, but you're also very unsure, I think, that the equipment you're using, whether
Right.
it's the quality of the screen you're looking at, or the placement and quality of your speakers that you're hearing,
Mm-hmm.
are actually giving you an accurate. I think a lot of people think that the gear is holding them back, which sometimes it may be, but I think genuinely 9 times out of 10 it's not, but you
Right.
think it is, because why isn't my
Right.
mix translating to my car from my headphones from
Mm-hmm.
my desk? Why is my photo looking really weird on a Samsung TV versus my iPhone versus my laptop screen, whatever?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much of that plays into it as well. But what you figure out over time is that uh, that there's other ways of measuring if something is technically accurate or not, and usually it's not necessary to have like the super perfect speaker placement with the high end $5,000 monitors,
Mm-hmm.
which are also speakers for people that don't do any audio stuff.
Yes.
They call the
Monitor
speakers
speakers.
monitors, which is funny. But
They're monitoring the sound.
but sometimes there is genuinely like a thing that people have in their configuration that it was holding them back. There was like causing this wrinkle and disconnect, where maybe their screen was tuned way too cool tone, so they were like
Mm-hmm.
compensating by always white balancing too warm, and that's why everything looked warm to everybody else except that person
Right.
making it. So over time that kind of stuff alleviates, but it's so easy to fixate on that and go a little too heavy in the re-listen or the re-edit
Mm-hmm.
of
And the
things,
re-edit.
and so there is something to that. I love that. Is very similar to how I do my culling process for
Mm-hmm.
images. Is uh, sort by the AI output, because and I have that very very not picky. So the AI chooses maybe like 40% of the photos that I took.
Mm-hmm.
I manually go over that pass, and I'll punch in and look at every photo at certain times where I feel like the AI didn't do a good job, or maybe there was something I remembered photographing better that it just left out. But it's one manual pass over that, send it to edit those choices for editing, and then one manual pass over the editing, and that's it. I'll do another cursory glance once everything's in the client gallery,
Right.
and maybe modify a photo or here, or a photo or two. But it is
Yeah.
very much like, let's just one pass, done.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That
and
same. Same
ideally,
with
like
me.
like you
Mm-hmm.
said, it'd be great to just do one pass and be done. But I do think, did you ever, or do you? I don't. Maybe outline your calling process, because I'm kind of curious if it's similar, or if you ever. I remember like my first year or so thinking it's just one pass. Like I go through one photo at a time. I include it. I edit that photo right then, and then I move on to the next photo.
That's what I
And if
still
I
do,
like
Sam.
it, I include it and I edit it and I move on to the next photo. That used to be my process. And I think it
Mm-hmm.
also had something to do with the very, very early days of like events that I would edit at the press club. It
Yeah.
was, I would run them all through Photoshop, like one at
Right.
a time. So
Right.
it was very much like, okay, this is the file I'm working on in Photoshop right now. I'm going to get the edit done and then move on to the next one, which is just horrifying.
People still do that.
I
Some
know.
people still do that, and I feel sorry for
Oh
them.
man.
I
Yeah.
my calling process has evolved a little bit. Where at first I was doing something similar. I was like, "Ooh, this is a cool photo. Let me edit this." Really, was more of just like an ADD trip than it was like a process. Where I would be like, "Oh, okay,
Mm.
I'm going through my photos." Especially, really, just in my first years when I was doing this. But like, yeah, I would go through and I'd look through the photos and be like, did I do a good job? And like, okay, that's a good photo, let me edit that. Go to the next one, that's a good photo, let me edit that. And then, thankfully I was picking, I was actually picking instead of just, instead of Xing or whatever, flagging as bad. I was flagging as good, which is good. But yeah, then eventually I, changed to a normal process of just culling and then editing after. And then when Aftershoot came out a few years ago, I started doing, I used that for a few years, and now I'm not using it anymore. I can't do it. I'm too much of I'm not perfectionist anymore. I would say, but I'm more that I
Yeah.
I need to physically see every photo that I took, and I don't want to, like, a lot of the stuff that I would basically go through Aftershoot and realize it was picking a good shot, but not the best shot of what
Yeah.
I thought was going on, and so I just have to do all this going back through the Aftershoot call, and I'm just not doing it anymore. So I am now gone back to straight up manually culling everything, even a $10,000 or 10,000 photo
Yeah.
wedding. Um, and but then I'm running all of those pics through Imagine,
Mhm.
and after that, going through that pass, taking a look, making sure everything looks good, and then uploading. So
Nice.
yeah, it's pretty simple, pretty standard. But and anything that needs to be run through Photoshop, whether it's usually there's only a few photos, maybe like 5 that need to go into like I have to get rid of somebody or something or some, I didn't shoot. I physically shot. There was one thing I shot recently where there was this huge photo of like, I don't know, must have been 60 people for
Ooh.
a big family photo. And there
Okay.
was this big bench in the way on the bottom. And I just had to,
Get rid
those
of
are the
that
kinds of
sucker.
things I throw it into Photoshop and get rid of that. But
The
yeah,
internal. Ooh, my rubbit is arriving today. Yes.
what's a rubbit? Do I want
it's
to
a
know?
it's a car washing kit,
Ah,
waterless. It's got like this battery powered spray nozzle, and you just spray the internal soap mixture and wipe it down, and that's it. There's no hose or I don't know. I
let the
probably just
record show
wasted
that
a
my
bunch of money.
eyebrows are furrowed.
Anyway,
My brow is
uh,
furrowed.
it's one of my favorite things is to wash my cars.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the yes, okay. So there's a lot to dive in there. I still continue to use Aftershoot. I really my workflow of adjusting and my manual pass over the call is so quick and easy because I've also used Better Touch Tool with the little
Mm-hmm.
joypad to turn off the library filters, so I get all the Aftershoot stuff back as a green color. Anything Aftershoot thought was good, I sort by that, and then as I'm going along, anytime, and this probably happens a couple dozen times throughout the whole collection, anytime I'm like, ugh, did I do good? Like it's just an instinctual feeling. Like let me look at all. I'll turn off the library filter, look at the entire unchosen stream,
Mm-hmm.
maybe flag in a couple from there, and then get right back to it. But you're right, it does take this degree of not giving up, relinquishing what is probably a better photo in the mix
Mm-hmm.
many times throughout the wedding for the one that's good enough. But
Right.
I that's part of why going over the entire collection manually twice at
Mm-hmm.
a minimum, I think is really healthy because you get
Yeah.
a beginning to end sense of what you got from the day. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're in the editing phase and you're making adjustments, you're going to have a different mindset of how that part of the day is like, I don't know, detail shots or something. Like you're going to have a sense of like, oh, you know what, I really didn't include enough details because you had already gone through the entire collection, and you
Mm-hmm.
can go back and add some more, something like that. Yeah, I think it's really, really nice to force yourself to take at least 2 manual passes, because then you kind of have a zoomed out worldview perspective of like where you're at in the whole collection versus trying to you'd get almost no sense of that if you go one image at a time or just
Right.
one manual pass over the whole thing at a time. All you have is right there, unless maybe you culled that evening or the next day. I
Sure.
think a lot of photographers do like to do that because they still have a very fresh idea of where they hit their peak and valley
Mm-hmm.
while working. Um,
Right.
yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And for me, I have a similar but slightly different perspective on it, which is that and I've talked about this a little bit in the podcast before, but I generally come back with a sense of like slight anxiety, not like a ton. Usually I'm like, okay, I think I did a pretty good job. But there's some weddings that I've come back from where I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like I tried a lot of weird
Oh,
stuff.
all the time.
And
Yeah.
I come back and I'm like, I don't know if these photos are going to be good. And I come back and over the years, like I said, I've gotten a lot better about like, so believe in yourself, and like you definitely did a good job. Like you have a good process, you're a good photographer, but you still come back and you're like, this was a tough one. There was a bad lighting, or the dress was just not a appropriate dress for her, or the guy looked silly in every photo.
It's
And
typically the ill-fitting rented suit there. You're just
yes,
like,
typically the
oh
ill-fitted
man.
renting suit, or the choice of a strapless dress, which is just almost never a good idea, even if you're like a size 0. And
Mm.
I'm like, and anyway, I'm going through it and I'm like, after doing a whole pass on it is when I realized, like, okay, I've got enough here to present the day to the client in a great way. Like, I have to just go through the whole thing before I really kind of come to grips with, like, this is a great set of images once they're edited. And I've talked about this before, where it's like it's almost like you're like a sculptor. Like, there's this just raw just thing in
Mm-hmm.
front of
Mm-hmm.
you, and it just all looks gray and drab, and like you have to just like hack away at all the, like, okay, this is not a good photo, this is like a good idea executed poorly, a bad idea executed well, this is like, this is where I nailed it, this is what they need to see, this is a grandma that was there that's very important to them, all this stuff, just really starting to whittle it down until
Mm-hmm.
you realize,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I have something good here. And I think the that process of going through the entire day and forcing yourself to, like, you know, face the photos, that you
Mm-hmm.
took,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and come to grips with, like, okay, let's do it. That is that's a huge part of being a photographer, and this is kind of, could potentially go down any number of rabbit holes, but I really like the idea of, I've been thinking about it a lot more lately with AI, that a photo is created twice,
Mm-hmm.
and that when you, as a photographer, you're not just trying to get something that, or as a wedding photographer, let's say, you're not just trying to capture something that happened, you're trying to capture something that happened, you're trying to make it beautiful and imbue it with the emotion that you feel was there at
Mm-hmm.
the time, um, or the emotion that you want them to feel when they when they see the photos.
Mm-hmm.
um, and so when you take the photo, you're just you're just looking at a raw, gross, flat image, and and that's the photo that you created. But that's not the photo that they see. The photo that they see is the one that you've carefully selected out of 100, 200, 300 snaps of that very moment, and you've gone through that moment in your mind twice to, like, well, you've three times at this point, where you've gone through the moment physically there, and you've taken what you felt was a good number of photos, something that actively captured that moment, and then you're going back through it to call and pick the right one, and then after that you're really going through and trying to imbue it with that sense of what it was like to really be there, which is the color correction and everything else. And anyway, I've been thinking a lot about that, especially lately with all the AI, talk about, if AI is just a way to imbue emotion into your images, you can kind of do whatever you want with them. Anyway,
Mm.
all that to say,
It's
culling,
uh,
great.
such a interesting time to bring up this kind of discussion, because I also think, thanks to the scourge that is TikTok,
Mm-hmm.
notable, but in my opinion, notable uptick in
Mm-hmm.
see what I did there, in
Ah, uptick.
clients asking
I
asking
get
about
it.
raw files. I've noticed it on my side, and I've noticed
Mm-hmm.
it by a lot in the wedding
In the
photography
Reddit,
subreddit.
in the
And
Reddit comments, yeah.
the discussion is usually not that clients are unhappy in any way. They just want the raw files. It's like, why
Yeah.
can't I have them? Like, I want the highest quality photo or what have you. And it's very, very extremely frustrating to because if you're not a photographer, one, you're not going to have the tools to open the raw files. Two, if I delivered the raw file in the way that I edited it, now I'm giving you a literal window and peek into my editing, my whole
Mm-hmm.
process,
Yeah.
right? If you're a photographer whose look is based on just the Adobe Color or Adobe Standard camera profile, you're basically giving your clients your preset and your overall settings, which is, in my opinion, like proprietary data. Like, they shouldn't.
Sure.
So, but you don't want to
Well,
deliver the raw
sure.
files zeroed out, because now clients are going to see all of this, like you mentioned, the the
The
first
zits,
pass of there's all the problems. Yeah. And
the
it's not a fully formed product, right? You are
mhm.
asking to see the sketch pad and notebook and written out scribbles. And if there was a historical way to see every edit you made in a document on Google Docs or something, you're asking to see every edit that I ever made.
Yeah,
That's not okay. Nobody would ever expect to see
no,
that from you. Or okay, think about how many times people write emails. You know, you're at your job and you're having this email back and forth conversation with a client or a coworker,
mm,
and then that client or coworker says, hey, you know what, this is we're really happy with the result of this conversation, we're ready to move forward, but can you just send me every iteration of every email you ever sent to me so I can review it? Like, that
yeah,
is what they're asking for when they
yeah, yeah,
ask us to see the raw files.
yep.
And it's uh, you know, I think part of it comes from freaking iPhones and Apple's
Freaking
increasingly
iPhones.
robust set of tools that they are giving the everyday consumer to make adjustments and modify their own images,
Hmm.
which is really cool. But
Yep.
people, you know, they don't know what they're doing. That's why
Mhm.
the most recent phone image editing interface is just a square, and you touch with your finger how you want it to look, and it'll be more saturated, less contrasty, whatever, based on
Sure.
where you land in this quadrant of settings. And it's like the most basic thing ever, and it is a cool interface, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
it's neat, but you have no idea what is being adjusted on the back end and why. And that's there's something to that. There's value in that. Apple's
Right.
released a mastering plugin for audio where it kind of analyzes the whole song and then does its best guess as to how loud it should be, where the EQ should be kind of flattened out, and there is a baseline standard of quality that almost everybody can agree on, and it makes sense to like have a tool that analyzes that and makes it really easy to make simple adjustments even when you don't really know what's happening behind the scene
Sure.
from there. But if you're hiring a professional to go through all of your images and imbue their experience and their look and settings on something, you have to relinquish that trust and know that it's that's the end game. That's what you're going to get. And
Right.
certainly it's fine to ask for things later if you want to have some adjustments made, but you need to have the photographer themselves do that, not do it on your own. Because here's the other thing: there's a lot of crappy photographers out there,
Uh-huh.
and it wouldn't shock me at all if sometimes clients actually re-edit their own photos better than their original photographer did. Now
Okay.
you're in a scenario where somebody else sees your wedding photos and you're like, oh yeah, my photographer is this person, but they're seeing the re-edits.
Yeah.
There's a disconnect between what that photographer is going to do for their next clients and what they're actually capable of. And it's just such a mess.
Right. And people are on the comments, on Reddit, on, forums basically saying like, hey, my client's mad at me because, they want to see the raw photos because they said that the photos don't look the same as they were expecting or something like that. And maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Um,
And how do you figure that out? How do you measure it? You can't. It's just, you have to kind of think a lot of these trends and decisions that you make in how your work gets consumed to the logical extreme, whether or not that's going to actually happen or not. Like, that is uh, how it's just a good exercise.
Yeah, and I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this because it was very recent. Uh, but I did want to talk a little bit, since we're on this, about a recent experience I had with a couple who contacted me saying they wanted me to help with their wedding photos because their wedding photos were too
Oh
small.
yeah, right. The resolution.
And I was like, what do you
you
mean they're
should
too small?
you should lay out the scenario. It was very
Okay.
kind of mind blowing.
It is mind blowing. And let me just start out by saying no offense to any photographers, especially young starting photographers who don't yet know what they're doing, because I, at one point, was one of you. Okay. And so was Sam. He was an idiot photographer who just had some camera in his hand and was editing, sepia. Okay. Were you ever editing
Oh, I
sepia?
went through the sepia.
I
Yes.
didn't do
Oh
the
yeah.
sepia thing, but I did do dumb edits. Okay. And I did
Yeah.
export things at improper resolutions before. And
Uh,
so, no offense to anyone. In fact, if you're listening and you are one of these people, good. You're in the right place. Um, so like I said, I got a request from a friend of a friend who's had some wedding photos taken and they were too small. And they said we can't print them because they seem to be smaller than my iPhone photos are. And I was like, what do you mean? I said, well, they said these images are like at 300 kilobytes. And I'm like, 300 kilobytes? Like that's nothing. That's like a few pixels. And so I said, send me the photos. So I looked at the photos and they were too small. They were very small. And there wasn't a whole lot of color in them. And so I'm looking at this thing. I'm like, okay, clearly this is some kind of low resolution JPEG. Well, I looked at the metadata and it turned out to be the pixel ratio was a curious 1920 by 1080 resolution, which, as you know, is just standard 1080p. And so I was like, that's a weird resolution because
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
person who sent these photos to me, the client, the couple, said that um, these were the max resolution that the photographer had, which set off all kinds of alarm bells in my head of like, okay, so he's either so anyway. So I was like, I ended up getting in touch with the photographer himself, which was really cool of the photographer to be able to to want to talk with me. And I after going through this, we realized that what he was doing was he was exporting his photos at full resolution, but they were ending up as 1920 by 1080. And so I'm like, okay, and 300 kilobytes a piece, like nothing in there.
Yep.
And so I was like looking at his metadata and I was like, okay, well, can you show me the raw photos? And he was like, what do you mean? Like, these are the photos. And I was like, these are JPEGs. You took raw, right? And he was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I shot raw. I was like, okay. I was like, what camera do
Yeah.
you use? This like some Sony camera. And there was an app that this photographer was using to shoot from the camera, to go straight from his camera to this app. I think it's called the IEM app, which is like a Sony app, I guess, for transferring images to the cloud. Going to the cloud and syncing with Lightroom, not Lightroom Classic, Adobe Lightroom, like Photoshop Lightroom,
The app, yeah,
the
just
cloud app,
everyone should just start
which I would
calling it.
encourage you
Yes,
no one to use.
never use, but
Um,
they really can't. It's so
and
frustrating. Adobe didn't just call it like Lightroom Cloud or something.
yes, strongly encourage everyone to switch to Lightroom Classic if you're not on it.
Yes. Wait, is that
That's not
technically
me being an
Lightroom
old
CC?
photographer. Yeah, that's me being a intelligent photographer.
Yes.
So, and so, um, so the photos were going to the cloud, and he was just importing them, or just editing them straight
So
from his
basically, the
computer.
app was auto choosing a weird like JPEG standard resolution for video export, and
Possibly. Is that what you think was going on? So I was thinking he might be exporting his photos as small JPEGs through the IEM app and not even knowing if he was shooting raw or not.
oh yeah, no, that's basically what I think. Yeah, and I'm guessing the default settings were just like a video format
Yeah.
size, uh, and
Yeah.
then then they start to populate Lightroom. So he didn't even realize that you could pop the memory card out right and put it in and
Correct.
import
So
the raw
I asked
files
him,
from.
where are the backup files? And he's like, these are the files. And I was like, okay, so there are at no point are physical photos being put onto any computer or storage that you have. And he's like, no. And I was like, when were these photos taken? It was like a few months ago. And he's clearly has used um, the cards since then.
Oh,
So
great. Yeah.
there is no getting these photos. These are the photos. So I was like, the only option here
Oh,
is to
wow.
AI upres these things. That is your only recourse. All that, and eventually the client was, had what they wanted, and they were fine. But I use this just to illustrate the point that it is, and the photos themselves are not, the issue. Whether the photos were good or bad, that's not what I'm talking about. This photographer has plenty of examples of good images. So the issue is that the technology of the moment and is advancing so rapidly and being adopted so widely by so many people that it's obscuring the process of
I
what's
mean,
happening in a
the
photo.
exact same thing can be said about cloud
Hmm.
as what you're kind of outlining with the AI tools now. Cloud and it's especially Apple's approach. They're literally like abstracting the
Yeah,
file system,
purposefully
right? They
abstracting.
like
Yes.
people literally many times. Oftentimes, it was our older parents or grandparents where
Hmm.
you would understand very quickly watching them have their just by the nature of the questions they were asking. Oh, you don't understand what a file is or
Yeah,
what a
they don't know.
folder is. They have no idea. And iOS and a lot of other more modern operating systems have only made this problem worse and more confusing, unfortunately. But I
Hmm.
wonder now if that is becoming an issue with people that grew up really only using super basic, abstracted away from the file system operating systems like iOS
Hmm.
to where the literal concept of a file is doesn't compute. It's just in the cloud and it's a thing you open up and there it is. But
Right.
to send
And
it,
I think along a long enough timeline, like in years from now, maybe decades from now or whatever, that I'm assuming will just absolutely be the standard. I don't know that you'll need storage on your computer anymore. Um,
totally. And maybe
and
that's a great end
and
goal
that's
to
fine.
aim toward in some
Yeah,
way. But
exactly.
also, as long as files are different, you can be looking at the exact same thing and not know whether you're looking at the raw file or the JPEG until you start to make adjustments, right?
Right.
That is when the benefits of one or the other really become obvious. Until that is no longer a thing, I just don't see. I don't know. I don't see how it's ever going to go away. And I mean, Apple really, really, really leaned into this with like I don't want to say ethically, but like it kind of exposed their mindset about this when they got rid of Aperture and just kind of moved everything over to
Right.
the Photos app, which is just terrible if you're a
Mm.
professional. I don't know
Yeah,
any
you can't
professional
use it.
photographers that would edit their photos through the Photos app, even though there are a lot of pretty professional level tools, like granular tools to make adjustments to raw files and your tone curve and all that. But
Hmm.
editing one photo at a time, maybe it's fine, but it's just a terrible overall interface
Sure.
to manage high volume and have consistency and batch things and all that other stuff. But that's where all of this gets so messy with giving people more control over their own photos and ability to make changes versus just looking at a photo and knowing that is the end result. There's nothing more you can do. But I worry, going back to my story about how when you know you can make changes, people just tend to invent things to change for the sake of it. I
Hmm.
worry that that's just going to become a compounding problem as more and more people are aware of these tools to make tweaks to their photos. And then it surfaces pushback and expectation on you, the photographer that was hired by the client, to make whatever adjustments they want or have to deal with the customer service aspect of, oh, my photos look a little like warm. What's up with that? And it all
Hmm.
comes down to the fact that they have like True Tone on and you don't, or something like that,
Right.
right? That we're just like, I don't know. It's great that people have tools to edit their photos well, but it's a big, big, big problem when those tools are disconnected from the tools on the back end
Right.
actually
The
doing
Yeah,
the
the
work,
process.
right? The tone curves and the color grading recipes and all that stuff that every professional or even hobbyist knows
Yeah.
makes is what's happening in the background. When that is abstracted away, you're just living in two different realities, and it's a problem that I hope doesn't continue to get worse. But given the essentially unlimited desire for people to come up with hot take talking points for things like social media
Hmm.
on TikTok or whatever, it's I don't think going to go away. I think it's going to just become an ever increasing problem. And we haven't even spoken yet about the not just color and tone, but retouching and how often I think people expect retouching without
Hmm.
really saying it a lot of times, or they are going to retouch themselves. And again, have that be representative of your work, where you're unaware, and
Right.
it's not like
I
you may
mean,
not retouch. Right?
I
Yeah.
had a request from a client this week who like right at the end of our discussion, and they were like, "All right, it's great meeting you and everything." And I just had, like, "Do you have any other questions?" The Now, granted, the person who was asking this question was himself a like a video producer. So he, but the question was, do you do any like retouching? After the fact, how many passes do you make? Basically, I was like, well, basically, what I do is I deliver the photos in a state that I believe are 100% done, and without, if there is anything you need, I'm of course like here to make sure that you get what you want. So basically, I'll offer you, if there's something that you need retouched one round, sure, like I'll go back through it if you need me to.
Yeah.
But which I've done in the past a few times, but um, I I'm feeling like I'm getting that question. Like that was the nature of how he asked it was out of, in my opinion, a bit of a place of not necessarily ignorance, but um, definitely like opaqueness about like what I do.
Yeah.
What does a
And
photographer do?
the term retouching is often conflated with editing. It's
Right.
like people just do you retouch, and technically that means getting in there and doing all the clinical like skin work and
Mm-hmm.
all that. But a lot of times clients are just wondering like, does it
Do you
color and tone? Are you
yeah,
doing like
are you
your
doing anything? And I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm doing everything. Like
yeah.
yeah, yeah. In fact, when he asked that question, I was like, all right. I was like, yes. I was like, this is the type of question I want to hear, from somebody who's like, I'm invested in the process of making sure my photos look good. Are you going to make sure that, are you just going to give me a bunch of like photos, or am I going to get like a real delivery of things that, of a whole set of images that really reminds me of my day? I'm like, well, let's go into that. So that was cool to me.
I mean, all of this I think is rooted in what I think can be thought of as a setback in, we talked about this last week, in the entire experience of looking at a photograph. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the fact that technically looking at it in a digital state is an unfinished situation. The end all be all
Explain.
of what people used to edit for as the, okay, we can all agree this is what we're looking at or not, was a physical print,
Yeah,
right?
physical print or an
You
alum or
print
something.
something out, you look at it, you mail it to your client, they're looking at the same physical experience. That, they might be in different color lighting or different brightness of day, but our experience of the world as we see it in a physical sense isn't nearly as varied and different as all the different devices that we look at digital
Right.
digital products on. And that sort of half state, or it's like 90% state of being done, but in a digital form, really creates so many issues where
Totally.
the end goal was the wedding album that you send people, and that was the physical product that used to be, I think, more or less how people did it, 15, 20 years ago. There was I would assume, very little pushback or discussion about, ooh, can you make this one a little bit cooler and this one a little
Mm-hmm.
bit warmer? It was like, this
Yeah.
is the end product. This is
That's
it.
it. That's
It
what you
doesn't
have.
invite a lot of tweaking and,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, an adjustment thinking. And
Uh,
it's what it is. Even if you have
yeah.
certain photos you don't like the way you look in or something like that, you turn the page, boom, there's another one where you love it,
Right.
right? So it's not like the whole thing is needing to be redone versus a continuous stream of photos in an online gallery where you start to just realize that you can tweak everything if you want and make adjustments, but should you?
Mm-hmm.
And is it right? Is that part of what you should expect from your photographer in the process? No. No.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I yeah. I think that is a very interesting point, that what we see online just because every screen is different. I mean, I got a feedback from an engagement session I did like 6 months ago or something, right before the wedding. I was like, is there anything, from the engagement session, any feedback you had or whatever? Or maybe they were the ones who just like volunteered it. They were just like, we loved the engagement session. There was just a few photos in there that we thought like weren't quite like, they were like fine, but they just weren't like what we were looking for. They were like kind of cool and like cool, like color wise, tone, temperature wise. They were like kind of cool looking and a little, like we want something that's like a little bit more, um, what did she say? Casual or fun or something like that. I have no idea what she was talking about. But I
Okay.
do think that it was something along the lines of like, because like when I looked at the images that she had picked for like
Favorites
the
throughout.
the
Yeah.
the image or for her wedding website, along with mine that were more on the warmer side and more of the kind of like smiley, close and looking at each other, and less of the creative, interesting kind of
Yeah.
weirder stuff. And all the other photos, the iPhone photos and stuff that were on there were all pretty much the same. This like very kind of close, warm, fun, happy, joyous thing. And, you know, clients have their own expectations about what photos are going to look like, but I don't know. I guess I guess all I'm saying is it pays to think about what, we have to sort of do a little bit more of the work these days, I think, of sort of thinking what do people want? What are people looking for? And what
Mm-hmm.
are the trends? And I don't think that that means you have to follow them. I think it means that you need to know what they are so that you can either be like, okay, clearly I want to give them something that they want. Like that, the absolute at the end of the day, I want them to
Mm-hmm.
have something that they want. Part of that process is them choosing me because I'm what they want. But at the
Hopefully.
same time,
Yes.
but at the same time, while you're shooting, you also want to be thinking about what they want and
Or
um,
what they expect as
what they
normal.
expect.
And now, right,
Uh-huh.
a lot of
Sure.
what exists in
Yeah, maybe
wedding trends
expect.
is just becomes like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you didn't get a shot of us cutting the cake. That's weird because
Yeah.
everybody expects that as a
Right.
normal thing if they're cutting the cake. But
Mm-hmm.
if you were at a wedding where it was the first time anybody's ever cut the cake as a tradition, you would be excused for maybe like, oh, they're just cutting the cake, whatever,
Sure.
not a big deal. Like that, you have to be aware so that what people just when the underlying assumption of what is included shifts, which
Mm-hmm.
happens slowly, but maybe every decade or so. Uh, that's super critical. But when it comes down to well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. There are a lot of interesting points there that, but we're at about an hour, so we should probably wrap this up.
Sure.
The, yeah, it's an interesting world right now. I really, really, really hope that what I want anybody to do is, after listening to maybe to this podcast, is put on a song that you really, really enjoy. Just listen to it, and then listen to it again, and think about if you had control over the loudness of the vocals or the loudness of the snare or any like singular element and really fixate on that. Is it actually perfect for you in the mix, or is it something you would, if you had the control, be tempted
Mm-hmm.
to make adjustments for? I wouldn't be surprised at all if almost everybody listening to a song would actually start to think like, oh, that backing track could be a little loud. I love that harmony. Why isn't it louder?
Sure.
Right. And the reason is that's not what the creator intended. And you have to just kind of stick to that as a reality of life and what we're living in, even though again everything being so digital and capable of manipulation doesn't mean that it should be. So it's
Yeah.
that's going to be so hard to maintain in life. And I keep thinking about a future where you could send maybe a singular photo through an AI app of some kind and it perfectly recreates it, but in like video form or something. And how,
Mm-hmm.
technically, per your contract, I bet most photographers that clients they're not allowed to do that to your
Yeah, it
work.
shouldn't be
Like
allowed
it's
to do
still
that.
your
Yeah.
photo.
Yeah.
But people don't think about digital assets in that way anymore. Like they
Correct.
think that they can do just whatever they want because it's a digital file, whatever. It's
Right.
me. I
And this
paid for
is
this. I made this happen, right? I'm
right. And we're just dipping our toe in the water
oh
on
yeah, I
that.
know.
Like that,
I
like,
know.
so, like, yeah, continue.
No, I think we should wrap this up because we
Okay.
can, like you said, probably have another hour long conversation. But yeah, we'll save
It's
that for
fine. I got to get a
next
haircut
year.
anyway. I'm going to get a
Yeah, me
haircut.
too. Oh, nice.
What do you
All right.
think? It's a little too long.
I think it looks good actually.
Well,
I'm starting to get to like.
you could use it. Get a haircut.
Yeah, I will. I will. All right. Whoop.
Well,
I forgot how we end these.
I forgot to. Do we just say whelp a few times?
I think so.
Okay.